Hey, this is Sabrina, Monarch of Monarch Astrology and Magic of the Spheres podcast, bringing you a moonlit nighttime recorded edition of the show. I'm going to be talking to you about the full moon in Aquarius happening August 19th, 2024, which is a big day astrologically, not just because of the full moon, but everything that is surrounding it as well. I want to thank you. I asked you for the last 40 days to support my channel, this YouTube, the podcast, all of it. And I'm just going to share the results with you. I was truly blown away. Wrong tab here, but we'll talk about this in a moment. We had 106 backers come through to pledge a total of $29,834. So I was shocked because, partway, like there was a kind of slow climb to the minimum goal. And then toward the very last minute, we got there and then we just kept going. So thank you so much for supporting the channel. I received also specific funding or support this time for scholarships for my evolutionary astrology intensive, which normally I just give away scholarships and tuition assistance just because, people are meant to be in the class sometimes, and if they don't have the resources, but it's a fit. I have, been able to have people included in the class, but it's never come from an actual pool of funding. So I'm really thrilled to have had that support here and also to have just, 106 of you. That means a lot to me. I'm excited to sit down with you for astrology readings, have you in the courses, and share these new talks with you. The Evolutionary Astrology Intensive is coming up. This is my program to support you in having literacy in this profound wisdom tradition of evolutionary astrology. We're beginning on October 8th. Apply by September 17th for tuition assistance or October 1st for normal applications. I'm going to come back to this at the end and talk more about it, and just talk to you about the full moon. So I'm going to share my screen again to show you what we're looking at. We have two different T-squares happening on this day. We have the full moon in 27 degrees of Leo over here with Mercury and Vesta, opposite the moon, full moon in Aquarius at 27 degrees, and then T-square Uranus in Taurus. So we're looking at a very catalytic full moon, like something, Aquarius is already about liberation and breakthrough, among other things, but so is Uranus, its modern ruler. And so something is really being stirred up at this time for profound change. We know this much, but also it's fixed energy that we're looking at with this full moon. And then Uranus coming through to break it up. So the fixed signs correspond with the most embedded, deep-seated, systemic, enduring patterns, your psychological complexes that come from your deep unconscious or your soul, trauma, nervous system patterns, your body's kind of homeostasis and comfort levels and all of that, your habits. These things can change, but it takes a lot of energy or effort or we'll just say energy to change it. And there is quite a stamina, quite a tenacity, quite an endurance that comes with a fixed sign. So it's also its gift, but also the source of frustration that comes with it. So we're looking right now at like something is brewing for this full moon where something very deep set, something historic is coming up to be changed. Whether or not you're experiencing those changes or you're just experiencing the pot boiling and getting hotter and you're like, it's time to jump out of the pot. It could be that dynamic also. So that is the full moon, and it's happening at the same time that there's a Saturn in Pisces, Jupiter, Mars in Gemini, Venus in Virgo T-square. And from a traditional perspective, Saturn rules this full moon in Aquarius because Saturn rules Aquarius traditionally. So we're also looking at something very dynamic happening in the sky in mutable signs, and mutable energy relates to quick shifts, quick change, a lot more shiftiness really and fluidity. So I think that at the same time that we're experiencing that, maybe gridlock of some old, stuck, ancient kind of dynamics, there's also some shifts in consciousness that may be quite new, some shifts in your thinking, some shifts in worldview, something a little bit more fluid that's helping oil the situation and oil what's very stuck. Another way that I like to enter thinking about lunations is including the decan associations. So if you haven't heard of the decans, all the astrology signs are divided into 3 equal parts, and there's different characteristics of those 3 decans. So I looked at it specifically for the third, the end of Leo, the end of Aquarius, and the end of Taurus to just open up, what are we thinking about this full moon? So on the one hand, just to kind of set the stage, it's Leo season. And so we're looking at themes around, your sense of royalty and regality, who you are when you think of being like a really noble figure, main character in your life. How you live with dignity, right? It's also about creativity, talent, expression, and whatnot. And it's reaching this full moment, this peak in the sign of Aquarius, which is a lot more about, ideals. It's about the whole picture. It's about systems. It's about social networks. And so I kind of think of it as like a moment where the performer is on stage and then kind of having an out-of-body experience or something like that. If you've experienced that, right? Where like Leo would be kind of that on-stage performer energy, feeling at the center, but then you get kind of like taken out and kind of blown back by it. So I think this can happen where you are really deep in the, drama or the theater, Leo, of your life, but something is coming up to make you detach and think about it from a distance. And that can happen, I think. It is part of the drama, right? It's kind of like the play pauses and the actor steps aside to get in the spotlight and have a soliloquy to reflect on what's happening. So having some moment come up in your life where you are being inspired to just take a step back and think about it from a bit more of a distance. So if we add in the decans and come back to that, the decans all relate to a tarot card. So I'm going to share these images with you. Whether or not you're familiar with the tarot, don't worry about it. But I think it adds a layer if you are familiar with the tarot, and if not, just follow me in the images. But the sun in the third decan of Leo will correspond with the 7 of Wands. And so also, I just want to name that my understanding of the decans is largely influenced by Austin Coppock's 36 Faces. I've reviewed these chapters recently. I'm not using direct quotes, but I'm citing him and this work because it's really influenced me and what I'm going to be sharing with you. So the 7 of Wands related to this end part of Leo, you see this figure here kind of defending himself against, these insults, right? Or these kind of like sticks coming up. And so you have at this point of Leo a sense of having secured and achieved the throne, whether we're talking like literal royalty, but it's like it's your position. And then you are defending that position from invasive forces. And so that could be, of course, like the leader defending from an uprising. It could be a comedian defending themselves from hecklers in the audience. It could be a business defending itself against negative reviews, and so on and so on. And this could also be an internal dynamic where you are protecting your heart from various forces. Right? You're protecting your heart against contraction or shutdown or, demonizing and judging your partner in a moment of conflict or whatever it is that you are seeking to protect your heart from. And I think that the trickiness about this position, right, of defending something is that you have to be really clear about what you believe in. And there is a reality at some point that if you are in a position of power or you have secured this throne, that there is going to be an element of defense that comes in. But I think if we also look at it as a full moon moment of Aquarius, it's like there's maybe some crisis in consciousness occurring as well of why am I defending this? Right. Like, when you get in those kinds of arguments or you're really kind of embedded or stuck in a dynamic with someone where you find yourself defending yourself all the time and you're like, why am I even part of this dynamic where I keep having to defend myself? So, there could be that. Or you might be really pursuing a dream or something like that, and you protect yourself from doubt or, the fears that it's not going to work out. And is that appropriate to be defending yourself against that material? Maybe you need to face it. There's a level of discernment or crisis in consciousness, perhaps, when it comes to this defensiveness of a central value. And then by the time we get to the last decan of Aquarius, within Aquarius, just to kind of set us up here, I'll stop the share for a moment and just come back to you. Aquarius, we have this image of a wall, for example, that demarks the city, the town, the culture, and then what's outside of it, what's beyond the wall. And you have a process within Aquarius of leaving, like not being part of that community anymore and like going to the outside world. You have the process of communicating between the realms. And so this can look like, when someone is still rooted in the culture, but is rather unusual or iconoclastic and is stretching the mainstream by being in conversation with the mainstream, right? So any public figure or community figure that's kind of pushing the culture in a direction because they've kind of gone on the fringes, but they're still in conversation. By the time we get to this last part of Aquarius, you have this possibility of leaving the known world altogether. Again, this is inspired by 36 Faces. So I want to share, come back to this image, the Seven of Swords, which is associated with the last decan of Aquarius. And there's a dynamic within this, contemplation of leaving the known world entirely, where it's described in 36 Faces, this decan as it's difficult. It's called the knot, this part of Aquarius. So it's like you're entangled, you're embedded with the culture. And it's not necessarily so easy to just free yourself, to just walk away. There's a process of discerning even what treasures you want to take with you, kind of like you have this figure sneaking away with some swords and leaving some behind in this image. So this could look like, if you think about jumping into the great unknown, right? And if you also consider it coming from this light of the Leo moon or the Leo sun, I'm sorry, and there's this dynamic of defending or upholding something. And then the Aquarius full moon's like, well, maybe I should just leave it all behind. Maybe I'm done with this fight. Maybe I'm done with this entangled dynamic. Maybe I'm ready to walk away or experience a deeper level of freedom. But what's stopping me? Where am I still attached? Where am I still trying to bring other people with me? Where am I still trying to be understood? Where am I still trying to belong? These kinds of questions. So putting these decanic images together, I want you to notice as this full moon is occurring, where in your life you're being defensive, whether you are actively in a kind of conflict or even if you're imagining a conflict that might arise if you were to speak your truth or bring something forward and you're already kind of experiencing the adversaries in your consciousness of if I say that, this is going to happen in the environment, etc. So on the one hand, the defensiveness is attempting to protect something perceived as valuable. And on the other hand, the defensiveness could be a dying battle that is giving way into your own revolution. There's a particular frequency here of having your fight activated only to realize you might be having a change of heart and consciousness mid-battle. Another thing I want to bring in, if we come to Uranus and Taurus, and the decan, the tarot association to it, you have an association in the later parts of Taurus with the Seven of Pentacles. This card pictures a man who is burdened by his work and by his harvest. So there's an energy within this card, within this experience of having accumulated a certain harvest, right? And so by this, we could mean your career, your life's work, the years you've put into a relationship, the years you've put into a craft of yours, like something in your life where you've actually accumulated a lot of material. You do have a lot to show for it, right? You maybe have a mixed harvest. Maybe you have some negative things in that harvest, but maybe also you have a lot of material simply. And, as a metaphor, we could say it's like having a lot of fruit from your tree. And either, you are going to have to, if the fruit falls to the ground and rots, you're going to have to throw it away and like use your body power to collect that fruit and get it into a dumpster or whatever. Or you might want to collect the fruit before that happens and put it in cans and preserve it and all of that. Either way, you have all this fruit and you have to do something with it. And in this image, of course, canning the fruit sounds like the objective best option. But when it comes to what it's actually pointing to in your life, not just the metaphor image, it could be that question of like, should I scrap this? Should I let this go to waste? Or do I need to work with it? Do I need to recycle it and whatnot? Tough call at times, like it's not just like because you've traveled so far, it means you need to keep going on that path. But that's kind of what this Leo card, this part of Leo is like, I'm loyal. This is the path. Like, this is what I'm building. The Aquarius part is like, well, maybe I should leave it behind or think about things differently. And then the Taurus part is like, what have I got to show for this? And do I want to keep working with this harvest or do I want to turn it over and recycle it? So we kind of get into like, if we just boil it down, we're kind of looking at a situation of we've done all this work, we've invested a lot, we've been part of a system, right? A system that has elements of culture, that has elements of our own unconscious. We're embedded in something. And the time comes of something is kind of triggering us to think about changing it, whether that's an internal force or an external force. And then this thing comes up in us of either we're going to defend the reality that we have, but if we're defending it too hard, it might bring up the question of, are we protesting too much? Like maybe there's some subtler truth here that is trying to emerge and present itself. That's where I think the mutable T-square that's happening with Saturn in Pisces, Jupiter, Mars in Gemini, and Venus in Virgo is kind of coming in to sweep and shake up our consciousness a bit and have us thinking differently. Right? So mutable signs come after the fixed signs, and they're about loosening up and breaking up the dense, packed, fixed energy. So if you want to learn more about that mutable T-square, it's my last video on this channel. So all of this put together, there's a few things that I'm reflecting on with the full moon. One is that we might be having some moments where we surrender to what is, what we really feel, how tired we actually are, instead of forcing our way through with the same old coping mechanisms. I'm going to drop a big Leo thing on you, okay? This one, yeah, let's go for it. Leo has inside of it a dynamic of, it's really about like creativity and expression and living our self-actualization. And our consciousness gets attached at times to some of the things that we believe makes us special, right? Like, I am worthy, I will receive love, I will receive my heart's desire if I'm talented or flashy or whatever in this particular way. And on the one hand, it's our birthright to be expressed and to be in our kind of our grandeur, you know? But when we get attached and we grip, we get into these complexes where I'm only valuable if you see how talented and amazing I am. And I can't show you these other parts of me. I can't even feel them for myself. I can't feel into what if my life is actually not that amazing, or like what if I'm not actually that talented. I can only bear psychologically being excellent and amazing and on fire all the time, right? And so putting a lot of energy into like, I'm going to stay up here, I'm going to work on my craft, I'm going to uh not look at my deep pain, right? Like I don't, it's like a cat that doesn't want to get in the water. You know, like cats don't really like to swim, cat because Leo, lion, and whatnot. So I'm going to avoid my deeper, darker waters and just be flashy and amazing. And this creates a kind of narcissistic patterning, um, not necessarily the full on disorder or whatever, but just that pattern of like, I need you to see that I'm so amazing. I need you to see my talent. And this is the only thing that I want to be reflected in. I can't bear this other stuff. So we get this kind of treading, like trying to be above the surface and whatnot that can happen in Leo. So what happens with that is that we don't actually surrender to the deeper, darker, like scorpionic waters. And so you might be, have those moments where you're kind of like striving and trying to be excellent and trying to be amazing and trying to be perfect and whatever, and not facing these harder, denser realities of like, I'm so exhausted, or I have so much grief, or I have this internal, like, inner child part that feels so unseen or so abandoned. Like, whatever that deeper root is, we don't touch it if we're gripping and striving and all of that. So there comes these moments of surrender where you lose the will to fight to maintain this egoic kingdom, this personal rule that you have to strive all the time and that you can't feel certain things. So you just get tired, right? So you surrender. There's like a depression, there's a thing that happens. Then we have the symbolic death, an ego death that happens here, and some space actually opens up for transformation. It's taking a lot of force and energy to maintain a certain performance, a certain sense of being on. It takes all this energy to avoid hitting the bottom. And it also keeps our actions in some sense ungrounded and in fantasy because we're not actually accepting where we are. We're trying to be someone amazing, someone better, someone different, et cetera, et cetera. So when people are using optimism and willpower and a lot of force to just like trudge forward and be positive and make the thing happen and whatnot, in an attempt to win and not be weakened, it actually can weaken a person's character and make them brittle and rigid. So, I've been thinking a lot about Simone Biles. I got into this whole like rabbit hole of like her story and her chart and all of that. And I think I'm thinking about her now because she had an experience at the Tokyo Olympics where she was expected to, be the best, to get all these gold medals. And she was starting to get lost in the air. Like she's a gymnast. And so she'd be doing these spins and get really disoriented. And she had the talent, but something was coming up for her psychologically. She actually had to withdraw and quit the Olympics, much to, there was a lot of support, but also a lot of criticism leveraged at her for doing that, people calling her a quitter, etc. And then she took these years to face her demons, see a sports therapist, get her head back in the game, train, and come back to the Olympics just now to be victorious. I think that's a great example of the dynamic that I'm trying to illustrate here, where it's like she didn't just trudge onward. She literally couldn't. She was facing like, if she keeps going like this, Gymnastics is not a sport without risk. If you take a wrong turn, etc., like you can really hurt or injure yourself in quite a serious way. So she had to protect herself. But also she had to kind of go into that, like her mental health, like seeing a psychologist, facing these, she'd talk about it as like literally facing her demons. And then she was able to come back. So this happens with Leo too, where it's like you get to be great in this life, but you don't do that through grinning and bearing it and avoiding your subterranean realms. And so I think that this is a dynamic really up right now, because on the one hand, having the will to trudge forward, to fight, to be loyal to your principles and ideals, there is a nobility inside of that. But when it turns over into being rigid and disconnected from truth or from life, it doesn't work the same way. Another thing that I was seeing actually about this dynamic is just considering defensiveness and fight. This was from, just observing and having conversations and kind of feeling the field at the moment. But that sometimes excessive fight and defensiveness, even though you're trying to protect something, actually constellates the thing that you are trying to not have happen, because you're acting from fear, right? So you imagine the threat from your place of fear, and then you project the enemy that you fight, but you then create the enemy through your own projection. So another, if you really have a lot of defensive character structures at play, if you're really fighting a lot in this life, it can also be a moment to consider the radical proposition of what if you stopped fighting so much, right? Because maybe you're good at fighting, but maybe you're so good at fighting that you keep actually creating the fight and creating the enemy. So that's a little bit more of a spiritual perspective, but something worth considering, because for some, it's important to learn how to stand up for yourself, where it's like you have to learn how to defend certain things. But if all you're doing is defending, all you're doing is fighting, it really calls into question why, right? And like, what about your stance in the situation is galvanizing the opposition? So, with all of this being said, it takes practice to see our mechanisms and the ways that we are defensive, right? It sees practice to notice our unconscious. We'll plug here the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive, because studying astrology, and especially Pluto-based astrology, is an amazing vehicle for this deeper kind of self-awareness. But often, we will find these strategies that our personality mechanisms and our unconscious uses. We find them very compelling and reasonable, if we're even conscious of them. And there will be certain moments, however, of like waving that white flag and feeling exhausted by the whole thing and wondering why we are trying so hard. We become attached to the strategies that have provided for us in the past or have been comfortable for whatever reason, but they run to edges of diminishing returns or just falling out of touch with truth. So this full moon may be uncomfortable here in presenting these themes to us of where we have become rigid to a detriment, where we are comfortable with something that's actually becoming, it suited us for a time, it got us to where we are, it helped us survive, but now it's at this edge of unbearability. And then there are some things that remain despite how things shift. Oh no, what I wrote here. Sorry, that's a different point. One thing that I want to come back to is that it is Leo season, and that there's something here about our energetic commitment to nobility and regality. So Leo season is here. Perhaps you've noticed some different situations showing up where it's been important for you to lead with nobility or embody a certain kind of grace and dignity inside of yourself in your wins and your losses and your fortunes and misfortunes alike. Right? Like, I don't know if you've had that experience or noticed, like, if you have Leo energy, maybe you feel this all the time. But if it's a passing influence, it may be like just noticing that that's been a dynamic lately. And I don't think this is the same as, say, being a good person just by any like social standard or cultural standard. It's like if you really meet the challenges and initiations of your life from a soul perspective, from a deep spiritual soul perspective, with a sense of dignity and regality. And the checkpoint in that story that's happening, I would liken to the way that empires rise and fall, that systems have to be strong enough. But when they become rigid and immovable, they can also become weak and inspire dissent. And the empire I speak of is the one within. Perhaps one of the deeper adventures in personal development is discovering that our unconscious is a type of government. Like, it has systems, it has guards, like it has an order to it. And that this government, this internal government, will maintain its order unless there's a revolution. And the revolution can come from our unconscious in terms of mysterious symptoms of discontent and the desire for our life to change dramatically, right? And then that part of ourselves is uprising, and then the stubborn, more embedded historic part of us is like, no, this is why we do things, this is how we are safe, and like tries to maintain the status quo. You know how it goes. So in the macro outside world of revolution, which is often violent, there is not necessarily a lot of examples of peaceful transfer of power, or the old world order being given new jobs that suit them. But at an internal level, we don't just kill off parts of ourselves. We have to integrate them in new and visionary ways, which I think calls back the Seven of Pentacles image where we have Uranus and Taurus, and this question of, what do I do with this harvest? What do I do with the years of experience that I've had? And Uranus and Taurus here is actually the modern ruler of the lunation, because Uranus rules Aquarius in a modern sense. So this is asking us how we recycle everything. If we are really going to let something go, how that serves a higher value also. How we make everything that led up to this point not a waste by cutting our losses or truly recycling, right? Or even how your consciousness processes what has come before you. You know, sometimes it can be so redemptive to look back on certain experiences that before we've considered a waste, or we don't appreciate that these things happened, we don't accept them. But when you get to a place of internal like rightness in your personal kingdom, queendom, etc., and you look back at what's happened in your life and you feel the deep dignity and rightness, even in the misfortunes, even in the bad things that have happened, or the things that really tore you apart in some way, that you can actually claim a deeper ownership of the harvest of your life events. That's what we're looking at, I think, in some sense, as a more redemptive quality of this full moon to be aware of. Sometimes our gifts are heavy because they came from coping. Sometimes our strategies that helped us survive become gifts and talents that we have to become more discerning about using. At the end of the day, we might not totally disavow ourselves from where we came from or the experiences that we've had, but we figure out how to participate anew with whatever it is that we've collected from the past. Freedom is a major theme for this full moon, and it may, of course, show us the very places we are defended against freedom, where we're attached to what we know, where we resist the jump into the unknown. So a few last things I'll offer about this full moon, which I think is genuinely quite an alive and catalyzing time, is that when you let go, what remains, right? Like when you're trying to force things, using a lot of your life force to grip and control and whatnot, and you let go, what parts of those things are just going to blow away with the wind, and what is more like a rock that will remain steady? I think sometimes it helps to actually just be aware of that and what it's like to trust in a deeper current, to surrender to that. It's a hard one because I do think there's things where we don't just surrender, like we feel responsible for stewarding, we feel responsible for directing the energy. And there's also places maybe where we are trying too hard, or we are being controlling, or we are gripping. And what would happen? What would we see remain if we gave up some of that control? And then in relationship to that mutable T-square, right? So that's the one I talked about in the last video more. But we have this storyline with the full moon of something heavy, dense, fixed, experiencing a kind of turning and revolution, and that's being supported by the mutable T-square at the same time, which is more about shift and change. I want to highlight a few additional points to that. One is that we may be getting previews of a new worldview or a new way of approaching our lives and our situations, but these philosophies might not be as actionable immediately as we would imagine or fantasize that they might be. We might be trying to make quick change, but some of what we're trying to change is actually very deep, that we need time, we need to go slow, we need a more patient approach. So just noticing if you have some of those like wonky moments where you get a big idea and think you can make it happen today, and it's actually like a long-term vision. Another is that there's some mood swings in the moment in the form of pessimism and optimism due to that Jupiter-Saturn square, right? There's a sense of brighter horizons, or a sense of, oh, it's not possible, like the inflation and deflation. And there's a pendulum here between positivity and negativity, and both are kind of inflated if they're inflated negatively or positively. So it may be useful to not grip onto various emotional states, but to stay open to the way that those swings are kind of eroding parts of our consciousness and maybe opening other doors. But at least I just wanted to name it so that if you're having that experience of that pendulum or that mood swing between like things are possible, things are impossible, like jadedness, optimism, like that whole thing, that's part of that dynamic right now. I should have left on a different note. I was like, I kind of finished earlier. Okay, but actually, because we have a space here, I did forget to say to like this video, leave a comment, let me know what resonated with you from this forecast, and do subscribe. And if you're new here, just say hi and introduce yourself. The Evolutionary Astrology Intensive, I wanted to just talk about that again. This is it's a 5-month, like it's either 4 or 5 months. It usually ends up being 5 months now. 5-month program to support you in advancing your astrology practice. I have, it's an all levels container. So historically, I've had people who are actual like astrology professional practitioners to newcomers to the practice. It's all level in the sense that we go through the building blocks in a way that supports the beginners, but also the way that I offer transmissions about the signs and the planets and all of that is so archetypal, so juicy, so rich, so deep that it fascinates some of my more advanced students as well. But what I seek to do through this program is to transmit a lucid awareness of the archetypes in such a way that I'm pointing you to the energy so that you can see that you already have a relationship with the signs, with the planets, that once you start that relationship, once you start establishing it even deeper, that the planets, the signs themselves, in a kind of animistic way, that's actually quite magical and striking, will start to teach you as well. I've had students describe this course as psychedelic in the way that after learning some of the archetypes, they were seeing them in their life in a way that was kind of synchronistic and magical. That's part of the craft with astrology, is that it is a cosmic art. It is literally a conversation with the cosmos. So what I can tell you is that my students always receive more from this course than they could have imagined beforehand, because not only am I introducing you to the cosmos through my relationship with them and pointing you to have your own relationship with the cosmos, your own personal relationship. But I am talking to you about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto as well, which are transpersonal outer planets. So they are corresponded to beyond forces in the universe, things like extrasensory perception or the depth unconscious or the collective consciousness. These forces in the universe that are beyond the scope of like the normal human ego experience. So even just starting to talk about those things, even starting to open those doors, you'll see your life expand in kind again in ways beyond what you imagined beforehand. This course, evolutionary astrology, if you're not familiar, is a form of astrology that seeks to look into the life of the soul, why you incarnated, what you have brought from prior lives, and what is your soul dharma, learnings, etc. in this lifetime. There is a way to read the natal chart from that perspective. And I have to tell you that these teachings, I have grown up alongside of them. They have opened up profound doors in my life. They've been my counsel in my darkest hours. They have been door openers in peak experience. It's something that I've formed a deep and enduring relationship with, and have really gotten to see just how much it affords and provides me and opens up for me in my life. So I really deeply love this school of astrology, and I love teaching it. I love inviting you into the practice. So the course is by application. Applications are open now. We'll get on a call and discuss if the course is right for you, what your learning goals are. Check out on this channel, I'll leave a link in the notes to Symbols of Power, a Pluto masterclass that I taught. And do stay tuned, sign up for my mailing list, link in the notes. For my next Pluto masterclass, I'm going to be announcing soon. I'm really excited for this one. I've started to make it a little bit of a practice to just like really be in my own deepening dialogue with Pluto every time I teach this course. Pluto is always a planet that I work with. It's the first thing I look at in natal charts when I do readings. But true to the spirit of evolutionary astrology, my own relationship to this planet can open and evolve and deepen. And it's important with astrology to keep the practice alive and to grow with it. So I'm excited to share with you some of what's moving for me in my relationship with Pluto these days in my next class, to just give you a taste of the evolutionary astrology intensive and this lineage of astrology. So stay tuned for that. If you're already feeling the call to learn astrology in a structured, deeper way, with guidance, with a cohort, with dialogue, it's actually a very intimate group container. Then go ahead and read more about the course and apply. You can send me an email, sabrina@monarchastrology.com, if you have any personal questions about the course, or just apply and talk to me about it on the call. If you have like logistical questions or things, most of those things will probably be answered on the course page. So thanks for watching this forecast. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for supporting the Kickstarter. I'm looking forward to another journey through Pluto and through learning the language of evolutionary astrology coming up again in October. So again, thank you for watching. Leave a comment, and I'll be back again soon.